Good morning. My name is Sara Forrest. I'm your worship associate today. I've gotten a lot of messages about dementia throughout my life, some from my family, some from the culture at large, and most of them are steeped in fear, hopelessness, guilt, or shame. Dementia is often depicted as a kind of living death, and always the language used to describe it happens to be steeped in loss. Shame or being sick or embarrassment isolates people, rendering their experiences invisible. Looking at this discourse here in America that feels so one-sided, I'm left with a lot of questions about how things could be different. We know that people are happier and healthier in community, and we know that no caregiver can do it all alone. Is there a way to look at dementia and dementia care differently? Is there a path towards better inclusion and support? I have hope. I'm pulling hard on this hope because I have a parent in the early stages of dementia. He's my stepdad, but we just call him Pa. You know, Pa, Ma, Da, get the whole trifecta. And it's been a wildly emotional journey. My mind always makes sense of experiences through metaphor, and this experience with Pa has felt like being on a river just above the rapid. I don't know if there's others that have had this, but when you're there before whitewater, there's this very strange moment right before you enter the rapid when the water is very glassy and almost looks still. And in that moment, you can almost pretend that the rapid on the other side wasn't there if you couldn't hear it. But once you enter that water, that's when you all of a sudden become aware of the speed and power. And that's when you know you are going to have to go through that rapid. And it's a dynamic moment, and it's full of challenge. We have entered that rapid with Pa, and it has been everything. It has been guilt, grief, frustration, but also some unexpected joys and gratitude. What I'm realizing is that Pa is not a living dead person. He's not a husk or a shell of who he was. He is different, and he is transforming. And sometimes the biographical details of his life aren't accessible to him. And even this can be variable depending on time of day, or just randomly there are moments where he's the Pa I've always known. Being with him on this journey has shown me how limiting our current cultural discourse around dementia is. In all the swirl of emotions, I'm still finding places of gratitude where I can feel connected to him and love him, not just for the person he was, but for the person he is and for the person he is becoming. I think the greatest harm to people living with these challenges is, and especially the people who care for them, is the sense of isolation. I know that dementia is not a monolith, and it looks different for every person and every family going through it, but there are so many people in our community who love someone, who care for someone, or who are themselves facing dementia. And we know that, more than anything, I believe that we in community can create a new paradigm. Reach out, speak out, get connected to others. They're here, right here in this room. I want to end with this beautiful reminder from our friend and neighbor, Mr. Rogers. Anything that is human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we are not alone. Thank you.
Our reading today is called Losing Solomon by Phil Nevin. We estimate a man by how much he remembers. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Things seem to take on a sudden shimmer before vanishing. The polished black loafers he wore yesterday, the reason for climbing the stairs, even the names of his own children are swallowed like spent stars against the dark vault of memory. Today, the toaster gives up its silver purpose in his hands, becomes a radio. An old Philco blaring a ball game from the 1940s with Jackie Robinson squaring up to the plate. For now, it's simple. He thinks he is young again, maybe 19, alone in a kitchen. He is staring through his own reflection in the luster and hoping against hope that Robinson will clear the bases with a ball knocked so far over the stadium wall it becomes a pigeon winging up into brilliance. And perhaps in one last act of alchemy, as Jackie sails around third, he will transform everything, even the strange and forgotten face grinning back from the chrome, into something familiar, something Solomon could know as his own. For about the last 5 years, one of the most meaningful pieces of pastoral care I have done here is to facilitate the Caregivers Support Group, a group of 5 women, each of whom is the primary caregiver for a person with dementia. If you haven't heard of this group, it's because it started by word of mouth, because I knew a couple of folks were doing this. But as it was personal medical information and some of their husbands weren't out about their diagnoses, we kept the group quiet. I have their permission to speak to you about this today in general terms. And Barb Pitney has entrusted me to tell their story in more specific terms. And she read this and approved what I'm saying. I know that it has been a powerful group for all of them, and for me as well now, as I help care for my partner Deese's mom, Kay, and I'll share more on her later. Dementia is, in many ways, a loss of memories, a loss of capacity, a loss of skills and interest one once had. And one of the things we've talked about in Caregiver Support Group is how challenging it is to go from a marital partnership where 2 people make decisions together, where the work of running a household is shared and divided, and where you have someone to talk to about the big and little things, to a relationship that becomes more like that of a parent and child, where one person can still make decisions about their personal preferences. Do you want to wear this shirt or that one? You want a ham sandwich or a turkey sandwich? But the big questions, do we need a new roof? Should we downsize? How are we going to pay the bills? And who is going to go get the groceries? Now one partner has to handle these alone. And everyone with dementia is different. Some folks forget the recent memories but spend happy hours mentally back 40 years ago. Other people go in and out of lucidity. Some people eventually lose nearly everything except a general feeling of pleasure or anxiety. One of my favorite stories of dementia comes from my friend Sara Forrest, whose father was in care with dementia for a few years. But he was such a happy demented person, Sara said. All the extraneous stuff just fell away, and he was just happy. Everything was a wonderful surprise. Did you see that girl? She just brought me my lunch. I was just sitting here and somebody brought me my lunch. What a great thing. A word here on the use of the phrase demented. It has been used as a slur, but is also being reclaimed by some folks with dementia in a similar way to how queer has been reclaimed. But if I'm not quoting someone, I'll say a person with dementia. A Unitarian Universalist minister, Jane Dwinell, together with her husband, Sky Yardley, wrote a long series of blog posts after Sky was diagnosed with dementia in 2016 that was eventually published in book form called Alzheimer's Canyon: One Couple's Reflections on Living with Dementia. Jane and Sky were hippies. They met when she ran a restaurant and he was the produce guy, and they spent 30-some years together building permaculture homes and giant gardens and orchards, assisting with rebuilding houses in New Orleans after Katrina, sailing through the French canals on a boat. She had previously worked in a nurse on memory care units before seminary, and they raised 2 kids together. When Sky was 66, he was diagnosed with dementia, and their journey took a different turn. They both chronicled their feelings and thoughts in blog form until Sky became unable to. They continued their traveling lifestyle for a while, but Sky suffered from hallucinations that made it very hard for him in different places. Their book contains a story very like some of our caregivers in this congregation, but of course everyone's story is different. One of the things I marked in the book is a section about the 4 things AARP and the Alzheimer's Association say about what will help prevent dementia. Spend time with people you love. Volunteer or keep working, stay busy and engaged. Get regular exercise. Eat a healthy diet, think plants and lean proteins like the Mediterranean diet. And do crossword puzzles or other puzzles, read and keep your brain active, take up piano. But I will say also that Jane and Sky expressed frustration that Sky did all the right things and still got dementia. Because they noted that we Americans think that if we exercise, eat right, meditate, pray, stay informed, and keep our minds active, we will be protected from death or disability. How many of us believe that? And as they say, nope, guess what? We all die. Life is 100% fatal. It's best, they say, not to do those 4 things out of fear, but out of joy, because life is better if we feel good. Exercising and eating well help us feel good. Staying engaged with meaningful activities and spending time with our friends help us feel good. We cannot know for sure what will happen with us. Focus on living, focus on the now, and live a rich life while you can. And note that a rich life doesn't end with a diagnosis either. Some benefits Sky noted of his dementia a year in included a greater appreciation of silence and beauty, a willingness to hold more space for others in conversations, an ability to slow down and not rush so much. It is important to honor the caregivers as well. As much as we culturally fear our own loss of brain power and memory, it's statistically more likely that many of us will end up as caregivers. It's important to build up those networks as well. The Population Reference Bureau is a nonprofit that specializes in collecting and supplying statistics related to populations and health and the environment to other groups. In an article about aging and dementia, they note that the proportion of adults ages 70 and older with dementia declined from 13% in 2011 to 10% in 2019. But they also note that as the large baby boomer population ages, that the total number of people with dementia will rise, and it, according to Alzheimer's Canyon, has increased 6-fold. If current experts report more than 7 million people ages 65 and older had dementia in 2020, and if current demographic and health trends continue, more than 9 million Americans could have dementia by 2030, and nearly 12 million by 2040. They talked about caregivers. They said, overall, daughters provide the largest share of unpaid caregiver hours for people with dementia, Daughters provide 39% of caregiving, followed by spouses who provide 25%, sons 17%, and other family and friends 20%. And 80% of people with dementia living in residential care had at least one unpaid caregiver assisting with their personal care or household activities. Jane notes that one of the most important things for caregivers is having breaks and respite, and I've seen that in our caregiver support group. Those folks who are able to take some time away from their caregiving duties and visit friends or relatives, or take a trip or a weekend away, tend to be nurtured by their time away and come back more able to sink back into caregiving, which is a hard job. It's especially hard to sleep when you're caring for someone with dementia. And so if you know someone in this situation, I encourage you to go over. If you can go and talk to someone and let their caregiver take a nap or go for a walk or go out to lunch with a friend, they will appreciate it, I guarantee you. Those of us who have been parents remember days of little to no sleep with small children. And there's a reason life mostly makes that happen in our 20s and 30s, because I gotta tell you, even in my mid-50s, if I don't have a reasonable amount of sleep at night, I don't do well the next day. Barb gave me specific permission to tell some of her story. It's a challenging one, with moments of humor. And it is the one couple in the group where the spouse is now in memory care. Now, I will tell you that I am honestly biased in favor of memory care for some people. My grandpa had dementia, and we believe that my step-grandmother had promised him that she wouldn't ever put him in a home because his first wife, my grandmother, had MS and was in a nursing home for several years, paralyzed from the neck down. But my grandpa, like a few folks with dementia do, became combative, and it wasn't safe to keep him at home. And finances weren't an issue, so she bought him a condo and installed him with round-the-clock caregivers, and he spent the last couple of years of his life bedbound and alone, except for the caregivers, with just the television for company. My family thought that he would have had a better quality of life in a memory care facility that offered activities designed for people with dementia and the chance to connect with other people. It's honestly much easier to care for someone with challenging behaviors when you get to go home afterwards and sleep in your own bed. And when you don't think they're doing it just to be ornery. And when it's your spouse or your mom or dad and you have this whole lot of history with someone, sometimes it is really hard to remember that they aren't doing this just to be ornery. Barb knew that Ron wasn't trying to be ornery. But it was frustrating when he followed her around all the time like a puppy, when she'd wake up with him patting her because he was lonely. And the constant drumming on everything drove her batty. She had a great sense of humor about some of his frustrating behaviors. And she had trained enough dogs to know that when Ron started peeing in the laundry hamper, she just knew to put old towels in there and then throw the whole thing in the washer on high. She was patient with the Cheerios everywhere and with him wearing 4 pairs of jeans because he remembered part of the process of getting dressed, but not all the process of getting dressed. But it scared her when he climbed on the retaining wall and she had to have the fire department get him down. And when he started wandering in the neighborhood. And finally, when he sat down next to her with a jar of spackling putty and a spoon to eat it like pudding, she realized that she couldn't keep him safe at home anymore. She is happier with him in a memory care home, and she sees that he is enjoying life more now that no one is telling him, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. Ron is still taking pleasure in life. There is a freezer full of ice cream that he gets whenever he wants. He loves eating sweet things. They called her recently. There is a rule in memory care or in nursing homes that you have to let a family member know if there is a fall or a suspected fall. So they called her, laughing gently, because they did find him on the floor, happily munching on a donut that he'd swiped from the snack cart. He even has an admirer, a woman who set her eyes on him as soon as he walked in and would gently bump Barb with her walker when she was sitting too close to him. Barb misses her husband, who she has been with since he was a teenager. Since they were teenagers, sorry. They tell you that you will grow old together, she says, but they don't mention this. That sometimes even when they're still there, they aren't still your person anymore. And that's hard. Deese's mom, Kay, lived with Deese's dad, Joe, in Arizona. We would see them a couple times a year, and we could tell that Kay was having some serious memory issues. In January of 2020, when we were at the Sundance Film Festival together, we sat in a Mexican restaurant and talked about the big blizzard that was predicted to come in that night. We decided to drive down to Salt Lake City that night so we could beat the storm, and then would fly out the following day. We were all part of this conversation. And then Kay went to use the bathroom and came back and remembered none of it. Not the storm, not the decision, not the conversation. The next day, we talked to them both. Kay denied any trouble besides aphasia or the ability to find the right words. She said, "Sometimes I can't find the words." But Joe agreed that he would call and get her an appointment in Phoenix to have her memory checked. Well, the appointment was scheduled for April of 2020, and we all know how that went. The isolation of COVID made her problem worse, and Joe's always been a pretty passive guy. They came to visit in July of 2021, and we were shocked at how much she had lost. This woman who graduated from Columbia University summa cum laude with a master's in mathematics and had a career as an early computer programmer couldn't remember any of her working life at all. But she enjoyed making small talk with my parents and going to the beach and seeing tide pools for perhaps the first time in her life. And then Joe had a stroke in November of 2021, and we flew out to take care of them and got her into a memory care respite place. And then after Joe got through rehab, we moved them to an adult care home in Phoenix. And then we moved them out here to independent living near us in July of 2022. But we hadn't been able to get her a primary care doctor appointment until Friday. Deese was recovering from COVID, but I never got sick. So I took Kay and Joe to the doctor on Friday morning. And it was hard. She was nervous and she didn't know where she was, and she was crying. She doesn't know her own last name or her birth date. And when asked what year it was, offered December? April? She can't identify what she feels except not good or tired. Sometimes it's okay. But I remember back when Joe was in the hospital after his stroke, and the love between the two of them was palpable. She would hold his hand and tell him she loved him. And on Friday at the doctor, when the doctor asked who we were to her, if we were her family, she said, "Some of them." She couldn't come up with Joe's name or the word husband, but she could hold his hand and say, he's mine. And I always say, "Yep, he's your person, isn't he?" And when Deese was over there without me one day, their mom asked them about the other one. And Deese couldn't figure it out for a while until they figured out it was me. "Where's the other one?" "Oh, Marcia. She's working today, Mom." Kay's never been a huggy person, but now she'll give me a hug. She and Joe will walk down the hallway to the dining room holding hands. It is not a life we might wish for, but she is loved and she loves. She's got her people, and that's not nothing. This afternoon, we'll take her for a ride to see the leaves and out to lunch and make sure she knows she's loved. And when it comes down to it, that is a decent life. No one wishes for dementia. But like many things in life, it is easier if you aren't afraid of it. Because fear doesn't help. Nurture your relationships with your family and friends. Know that life is worth living at a slower pace. Care for the caregivers among us. Offer a listening ear. Know that even when caregivers complain, they still love their person. And be gentle with one another. Blessed be, and amen.